Darkness is not always seen, but some can feel it. Some stories are not just meant to be told, but to serve as a warning. What you are about to hear will not leave you alone at night. Is it real, or just a terrifying tale? That is for you to decide. Deep in the misty valleys of Transylvania, there was a village so old that it no longer appeared on any maps. Kodru. The villagers believed it was cursed. For centuries, people whispered about the ancient rituals said to bring back the dead. Among them was Luca Petrescu, a skeptic who dismissed such stories as folklore. He never believed in ghosts, curses, or forbidden magic, until the night his best friend, Matej Stoica, died in a mysterious accident. Devastated and desperate, Luca recalled the whispers of the elders. They spoke of an ancient ritual, one that had been banned for generations, a ritual that could bring back a lost soul, but at a terrible cost. The ritual had to be performed at midnight in the old cemetery, under the pale glow of the moon. A drop of blood, an incantation in an unknown language, and absolute silence. That was all it took. Shrouded in darkness, Luca stood before Matej's grave. The air was cold, unnaturally still. He took a deep breath, pricked his finger with a rusted knife, and let his blood drip onto the damp soil. He whispered the ancient words. At first, nothing happened. But then, the ground beneath him trembled. A thick, unnatural mist began rising from the grave. Luca's heart pounded as he took a step back. And then, he heard it. Why did you come, Luca? The voice was not Matej's. Luca turned, his breath catching in his throat. A figure stood before him, emerging from the mist. It looked like Matej, but it wasn't. His skin was unnaturally pale, his eyes solid black. His limbs twitched, as if struggling against an unseen force. You shouldn't have done this, the figure whispered. Panic surged through Luca as he stumbled backward. But before he could move, the thing lunged forward, its cold breath brushing against his skin. Luca screamed as everything around him went dark. The next morning, the villagers found Luca's clothes near the grave, but there was no sign of him. The soil looked freshly disturbed, and when they dug up the grave, Matej's body was gone. From that night on, the villagers began hearing whispers in the wind. Luca is still here. On a cold, windswept hill outside Edinburgh, there stood a house that no one dared enter. Blackwood Manor. It was once home to a noble family, but centuries ago it was abandoned after a terrible event. The legend said that Lord Blackwood had conducted a dark ritual inside the house, one that opened a door to something that should have never been unleashed. For years, locals claimed to see a shadowy figure moving through the corridors at night. Michael Carter, an American paranormal investigator, had heard the stories. He had spent years exploring haunted locations, but Blackwood Manor was unlike any place he had visited before. Determined to uncover the truth, he entered the manor at midnight. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of decay. The wooden floor creaked beneath his steps. Dust-covered portraits lined the walls, their painted eyes seemingly watching him. Suddenly, a movement caught his eye. A shadow, just at the edge of his vision, slipping through a doorway. Michael's breath hitched. He reached for his camera, but before he could record, he felt it. A cold breeze against his neck, though no windows were open. And then, a whisper. You don't belong here. Michael spun around, shining his flashlight into the hallway. That's when he saw it. At the end of the corridor stood a tall, faceless figure, completely black, like a void in the shape of a man. It didn't move at first. Then, without warning, it rushed toward him. Michael turned to run, but the doors, the same ones he had left wide open, were now locked shut. His vision blurred. A crushing force wrapped around his chest, and darkness swallowed him whole. The next morning, Michael woke up on the cold stone floor, alone. The manor was silent, exactly as it had been when he arrived, but something was different. When he looked down at his hands, there were burns. They were in the shape of fingers, as if something had grabbed him. That night, as he lay in bed, Michael tried to shake off the fear. It had to be his imagination. It had to be. But when he checked his footage, his blood ran cold. As he fell to the ground in the video, a dark figure loomed over him, bending close. And then, in a voice so low it was almost a growl, it whispered, "We will meet again.